Have you ever wondered why a woman's silence can unravel a man more completely than her words ever could? Not the silence of manipulation, not the cold shoulder born from pride, but the sacred, grounded stillness of a woman who no longer needs to explain herself. That silence can break something in him, not because she's withholding, but because she's done performing, done softening herself into something smaller, done pleading for his recognition, done carrying the weight of emotional labor he refuses to meet. And it's in that moment, when she stops speaking, stops reacting, stops needing, that something inside the masculine begins to fracture. What Cayce called the echo of unintegrated energy begins to swell, because the feminine, in her quietest state, becomes the loudest mirror. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't argue anymore, she simply withholds her frequency. And to a man who's been surviving on her spiritual generosity, her attunement, her intuition, her emotional bandwidth, this is starvation. He doesn't realize it immediately. At first, he thinks she's just moody, distant, going through something. He thinks she'll come back around. She always has. Her compassion always pulls her back. Her empathy always makes excuses for him. Her softness always bends just enough to keep things going. But not this time. This time she's silent. Not because she wants to hurt him, but because she has heard herself finally. And when a woman hears her own soul louder than she hears his promises, his excuses, his apologies, that's when everything shifts. Because she's no longer trying to change him. She's no longer hoping he'll wake up. She's no longer casting her light into a void that never reflects it back. She's conserving. She's reclaiming. She's leaving energetically, even if her body is still in the room. And he can feel it. His ego begins to tremble. Not because she attacked it, but because she's no longer feeding it. This is the feminine secret Cayce hinted at, that it is not force or fire that awakens the man. It is the withdrawal of resonance. The quiet, divine collapse of a woman's emotional availability that cannot be earned back with performance. It must be met with transformation. But he doesn't know how to transform. Not yet. So he panics. He tries to pull her back with charm, with half-truths, with, "I've been busy," and "you're overreacting," but she doesn't bite. Because feminine silence, once activated from self-worth, becomes the most powerful spiritual teacher a man will ever face. It is not absence, it is presence without attachment. It is the embodiment of the Stoic principle Seneca once described. He who is brave is free, and she has finally become free, from emotional codependency, from the hope that he'll change, from the belief that her love alone can fill the cracks he refuses to seal from within. The silence becomes sacred, and he hears it everywhere. In her eyes that no longer light up when he enters the room. In her touch that is no longer offered freely. In her body that now feels distant, untouchable, unknowable, like a temple he once prayed at but took for granted. This is the silence that breaks him. Not because she's gone, but because she's present in a new way, present to herself. She used to speak through words, through "can we talk?" and "I just need you to understand." Now she speaks through stillness, through boundaries, through unshakable calm, and it unnerves him. Because her emotional chaos used to be proof that she cared. Now, her peace is proof that she doesn't need him anymore. He begins to spiral. He tests her, pokes at her, tries to trigger a reaction, to pull her back into the old pattern where his validation was the oxygen she craved. But she's not there anymore. She's breathing a different air now, one that doesn't depend on him. And it's this silence, this terrifying, holy silence that breaks the illusion of control he once held over her. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that her silence has forced him to feel. Feel what he buried. Feel what he deflected. Feel what he refused to meet in himself. That is what Cayce meant when he said that feminine energy, in its highest form, becomes a mirror to the masculine soul, not to reflect what he wants to see, but what he needs to confront. And when the mirror stops speaking, when the mirror stops pleading, when the mirror simply stands still, he sees himself with a clarity that can no longer be denied. She doesn't even have to say, "You hurt me." Her silence already speaks it louder than pain ever could. Because true feminine silence isn't absence, it's awakening. It's a void so potent that it amplifies everything a man has been running from. His patterns, his deflections, his fear of intimacy, his tendency to disappear emotionally while remaining physically present. Now, she is the one who's present, but not available. And that difference is what shatters him. He begins to realize that the war was never between them. The war was always within him, and her silence has become the battlefield. It strips him of performance. It strips him of excuses. It strips him of power plays. Because feminine silence is the one language the male ego doesn't know how to decode. He was trained to react to volume, to drama, to chaos. But she gives him none of it. Instead, she offers him stillness. Stillness that burns. Stillness that reveals. Stillness that demands a higher version of him, not in words but in energetic accountability. He starts feeling it at night, when the distractions wear off, when the noise fades, when the applause no longer means anything. That's when he notices the ache, the absence of her emotion, the vacuum where her light used to live. She's no longer reflecting his greatness. She's no longer soothing his avoidance. She's no longer holding space for the version of him that refuses to evolve. And this haunts him, because he still sees her, maybe at a distance, maybe on a screen, maybe in memory. But she's different now, luminous in a way she never was when she was with him, radiant in her detachment. She hasn't become colder. She's become clearer. Because feminine silence, when rooted in healed self-worth, doesn't shrink, it amplifies. It becomes the storm behind the calm, the truth behind the exit, the initiation behind the heartbreak. And it's after she's silent that he begins to hear everything she ever said. But by then, she's no longer translating her love into language he refuses to learn. She's already moved into another timeline. One where her softness is honored. One where her nervous system doesn't flinch. One where her silence is no longer a cry for help, but a standard of peace. This is what breaks his ego. Not that she left, but that she did so gracefully. Without destruction. Without revenge. Without needing to be right. And now, he sits in the echo of everything unspoken. He replays the way she used to pause before she responded. The way she used to reach for him emotionally, even when he was guarded. The way her tone slowly shifted from hope to exhaustion before it faded into nothing. That nothingness is what dismantles him. Because ego expects an ending that confirms its narrative. It expects closure that satisfies the illusion of control. It expects a dramatic final scene so it can say, "See, she was unstable," but she gave him none of that. She exited like a woman who finally realized her love was being absorbed, not reciprocated. And she chose silence, not as a weapon, but as a sanctuary. Now, her silence becomes a mirror he cannot shatter. And in that mirror, he sees the truth. She didn't abandon him. He abandoned himself long before she walked away. She waited. She reached. She softened herself to accommodate his resistance. But silence is the soul's final boundary, and when she stopped speaking, it wasn't a game. It was a revelation. A woman does not become silent until she has screamed within herself for far too long. Her silence was not a withdrawal, it was a rebirth. Cayce called this energetic transmutation, the moment when pain becomes power, when longing becomes clarity, when the emotional chase becomes stillness rooted in truth. And now he knows. The silence that broke him was never meant to hurt him. It was meant to free him. But freedom, in its purest form, feels like loss when you're still bound by ego. Now, he walks through life with that silence stitched into his spirit. It follows him, not because she cursed him, but because she reflected him. Fully, lovingly, clearly. And in choosing silence, she finally chose herself. He didn't lose her because she stopped caring. He lost her because she stopped explaining her worth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.